I honestly think at this point I am cursed when it comes to filming. The last video I put up was my Herkia 2.0 wrap up, and I mentioned that every time I sat down to film that noise would happen, someone would start cutting their grass. Well, today at the end of July I've sat down to do my June wrap up, and now my neighbours are having a really loud conversation right outside my window. So apologies if you can hear that. Anyway, hey folks, welcome back. Um, yeah, I've already told you this is going to be my June reading wrap up. I'm trying to just get in the habit of, even if I end up doing these way too late, that I just do them anyway. And honestly, the amount I've read in June and July, it's a bit too much to double them up. To do a repeat of what I did in April and May. So without too much ado, we're just going to jump into this. As always, starting with the DNFs. So the only book I DNF'd in June, I'm not going to speak too much about it because I've already told you guys about it. If you're a consistent watcher of my channel, you already know that I DNF'd Brightfall by Jamie Lee Moyer. This is it's essentially a Robin Hood retelling, or a Robin Hood sequel, where it's set in a world where magic and the fae and the fairy realm, they all exist, and everyone sort of like knows that they exist, and they live side by side with the mortal world. For reasons unbeknownst to us at the beginning of the book, Robin and Marion are divorced, and Robin has basically sequestered himself in the abbey, kind of living the life of a zealot essentially. But something has been going around and killing the merry men off one by one. So Friar Tuck basically goes to Marion, because Marion is a practitioner of magic and the likes, basically goes to her, is like, look, I think you might be the only one with a sensible enough head on you, essentially. Could you kind of figure out what's going on here? And so she starts this random journey of trying to figure out what's happening to the merry men. Ultimately, I despise the characterization we got of Robin in here. I did not agree with his choices. I honestly just thought he was a dick. That's all there is to it. He was an extremely unlikable character, and not, as I'll mention in I think the last book I'll mention here, not unlikable in a good way. Not unlikable in a way where you can go, yeah, I can still get behind you. It was just, I hated every minute he was on page. And so yeah, I DNF'd it. Go check out my Robin Hood vlog where I went down to Nottingham. I was camping just outside Sherwood Forest. There was an event on. And I reviewed both this and Outlaw by Michael Morpurgo. And yeah, check out that if you want to see my bigger, longer thoughts on this. But this was my only DNF for June, and I finished, according to Storygraph, I finished 12 books in June. So to only have one DNF, I think that's pretty good. Okay, June was also, essentially it was the last full month of Herkiad, so as you'll see, there were, as well as like my usual audiobooks and things, there were a few novellas, a few short stories, just really trying to get that last prompt finished. So yep, I'm just running through Storygraph in order. So the first book that I finished, it was Mr. Doubler Begins Again by Senny Glaister. This was utterly charming. Excuse me. Genuinely, charming is the best way to describe it. It is about a grumpy, cantankerous old man who's very set in his ways. He has very much become a hermit by design. He lives up at the top of the hill in his farm. He is a potato farmer, and he just wants the world to leave him alone, and he wants to be left alone. But one day his housekeeper takes ill, and she is literally his only connection with the outside world. She takes quite poorly and can no longer work for him. And so she sends her daughter in his stead. And this book is about Mr. Doubler just slowly and literally at one point being dragged out of his house and dragged back into society, and this within the town, just this community all coming together, not just for Mr. Doubler but for each other. And it was genuinely like some really, really warm, lovely friendships. This book would be a great recommendation if you read A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Backman and were like, I really enjoyed that but was maybe just a bit too sad. Read Mr. Doubler Begins Again, because it is essentially a more light-hearted British version of A Man Called Uwe. I think that's really all the recommendation I need to give it. It was an utterly wonderful, wonderful read. It was also a library book club pick, and I think, with the exception of Piranesi, which I recommended, this has probably been my favourite book that I have read for my book club so far. And we've been doing this book club for a couple of years now, so yeah, it was great. I don't know why I've started filming this when I'm like so snuffled up right now as well. If I am sniffling and snuffling a lot more than I normally do, I do apologise. I was camping this weekend and I've come home with some form of travel sniffle. For the most part, I feel completely fine, like I've still been working and things. I'm just a bit more hay fevery congested than normal. I will try and edit most of my sniffles out. Right, moving on. The next one I read, although I have the physical book, I did actually read it on audio, and the narration was actually pretty decent. I quite enjoyed it. But that is The Crimson Moth by Kristen Ciccarelli. In the US, I think it's known as The Rebel Witch. Or is that book 2? So, no. Rebel Witch is the sequel. In the US, this is also known as Heartless Hunter. This is... It's not often we get to say this, but this is essentially a true enemies to lovers. Romantasy, obviously. But we have basically got our main character, Rune. She is a witch. She starts sort of like trying to get close to Gideon, who is the brother of a very close childhood friend of Rune's. She starts trying to get close and essentially fake dating him, fake courting, because he is part of the guard and the witch hunters. And she starts trying to get close to him so that she can sort of like get information and try and get access to the prison to help release some of the captured witches, because witchcraft and witches are illegal in the country where they live. Gideon, who, as I've said, is a witch hunter, starts courting, fake dating essentially, Rune, because he suspects her of being the Crimson Moth. The Crimson Moth is sort of like this elusive witch who's been going around freeing other witches. So they are both trying to get close to each other with ulterior motives. Very much, although they don't want to harm each other, if it came down to it, they absolutely would. Which just made this such a, like, I really enjoyed this. I don't know how many stars I gave it anymore. But there was something about this. It's not the most amazing thing I have ever read, but I kept going back and back and back to it. Kept drawing me back. On the front of it, it says like a moth to a flame, and I was very much like a moth to a flame with this one. The tension we had between Rune and Gideon was great. And the plot and the intrigue that goes behind it was so well done. I do have The Rebel Witch, the sequel, upstairs, and I anticipate getting to it fairly soon, because the way this ended, like, I went all the way through it going, oh, you know, yeah, it's enemies to lovers, and it's like, and then just like something happens at the end, you're like, oh god, this just, you guys genuinely are enemies. What is happening here? Because you expect, even though this is book one in a duology, by the end I've gotten so used to and spoilt with romance that I was still expecting sort of like a happy ending, not that humdinger of a cliffhanger. So yeah, I had a great time. With this one. What did I finish after that? Oh, after that, at the start of June, an anthology. Oh, I can't remember what the anthology is called. There is an anthology called After the End that has been edited, curated, and produced by Ellie Hazelwood and Adriana Herrera. It was essentially self-published, I guess. They published it. They did it. They backed it through Kickstarter. Unfortunately, I only found out about the Kickstarter after it ended. So until now, it has been the only, and I mean the only, Ellie Hazelwood that I have not read was First, which was the first in the After the End anthology. However, at the start of June, all the audiobooks were released. So naturally, I immediately started listening to it. I dropped everything else. It timed really well, because the audiobook for this it dropped just as I finished listening to The Crimson Moth. So First, it is the After the End anthology. It is a series of novellas. I wouldn't really call them short stories, but it's a series of novellas where they're all post-apocalyptic, dystopian. What happens when like the world has kind of come to an end, essentially. So in this one, humanity are living, they're living in like underwater cities, essentially, with the nobility and the upper echelon are closer to the surface, and they occasionally get sunlight. When the tides withdraw a little bit, they occasionally even get to go outside. Those in the lower castes, they're trapped, they get like nothing. And it was also Omegaverse. Now, if you thought Bride and Mate were Omegaverse, like they are, but they were very much Ellie dipping her toes into Omegaverse. With First, she went, okay, done this a bit, now let's really dive in, and she dove in. But it's basically, oh, how much do I want to tell you about this? I really don't want to say too much about it, because given that it is just a novella, there's not a huge amount of story here. I mean, there kind of is. Like, she crafted it so well. I ate it up. If you like Ellie Hazelwood, you will like this book. If you don't like Ellie Hazelwood, you're not going to like it. Although I would say, of everything she's written, this is probably the most different, because there's no academia at all. This is not a fluffy rom-com. This was like, oh, Ellie, you kind of got dark here. Kind of here for it. But also I'm really biased because it's Ellie Hazelwood and I love Ellie. So yeah, that was First. And then next, mostly just because you can see them here. I'm still kind of I miss Rachel Reid and Game Changer. So it's just like, I wonder how I feel about like other hockey romances, but do I want to commit to anything else? So I noticed that Rebecca Jenshak released Summer Thought, which is part of the Summer Loving collection, which is one of Amazon's original short story collections. It was fine. it was fine. It's only like 49 pages, so I didn't waste too much time on it. Yeah, there wasn't, like, it is technically a sports romance, but it was more of a college romance. Our main character is convinced that the male love interest absolutely hates her, and it's very, very apparent from the word go that's like, no, no, he doesn't hate you. You are willfully misunderstanding everything at this point. He's very much trying to put a lot of distance between you because he's very obviously in love with you. It's just that you were dating his best friend and he thinks you're still dating his friend. So, yeah. College romance, misunderstandings. It was just a whole lot of like nothing I'm massively fond of. So, yeah, it was fine. With very few exceptions, I found most of the Amazon short story collections to simply be just fine. Unless it's by an author I absolutely adore, or yeah, unless it's by like an author I know I already adore. I'm just not really a short story person, so I really struggle to find anything of substance that really gets me hanging in there. But that said, the next one I read was also a short story, and this one did have a lot of substance, and this one was like, the amount that was packed into 37 pages was insane. Now this one was Men, Women and Chainsaws. Men, Women and Chainsaws by Stephen Graham Jones. We're getting towards, when did I read this? I read this mid-June. Got less than a month till Herkiad finishes. I still have a number of prompts I need to finish. I need something by an Indigenous author. Nothing is appealing to me. There's a lot of what I'm seeing in the communal spreadsheet and things, and on Storygraph is a lot of non-fiction, and I was so non-fictioned out by this point because I'd read a lot of non-fiction. I'd read like 5 non-fiction in the last year by this point, and you know, most years you're lucky if I read 1. So I was like, I don't need more non-fiction. And there's a lot of like literary and horror being suggested to me. Now, Stephen Graham Jones is a horror writer, but it's an author I keep seeing a lot of buzz about, and it's like, there is a bit of FOMO where it's like, oh, everyone keeps really enjoying this author, but I kind of know I won't because I really don't do horror. So I thought if I pick up the short story, that might give me a taster of what I'm missing out on enough. And you know what? It absolutely did. So Men, Women and Chainsaws is basically a slasher horror about this woman who finds this old decrepit car, its rust buckets falling apart in the scrapyard, and accidentally bleeds on it, and notices that the bit that she bled on starts to look really good. It's like her bleeding on the car is restoring it. So over the next few weeks, she continues to bleed on various bits of the car and essentially restores it. And plot-wise, I won't tell you much more than that, but know that it is a slasher fic. The car is connected to her past, and we're tackling themes of domestic violence and abuse through a manipulation through an ex-boyfriend. Now, Stephen Graham Jones managed to fit all of that into 37 pages. Everything felt earned. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt shoehorned in. I had a really good idea of the characters. They all had individual personalities. And the fact that he managed to do that in only 37 pages. Holy crap. And on top of that, the atmosphere. Wow. If I were a horror reader, I would absolutely be a Stephen Graham Jones convert and be like, yeah, because I really do understand why he is such a popular writer and why people go gaga essentially every time he releases a new book. Buffalo Hunter Hunter was released a while ago, and I am still hearing about it, and it's still on people's like anticipated and must reads, and it was on like almost everybody's top 10 of 2025 last year, and I fully expect it to be on most people's top 10 of 2026. I think I'll be the only one whose it doesn't appear on, whose top 10 list it doesn't appear on. But now that I've read this, I'm like, I get it. Because just what he managed to pull off in 37 pages, I mean, like, if that's what he can do with 37 pages, what can he do with 370, you know? So yeah, really, really glad I read this. It means that, yeah, when his next book comes out and everyone's getting really hyped about it, I can be like, I get it. I understand why you were so hyped about it. It did, however, confirm to me that I'm never reading another one of his books, because if that's what he managed to achieve in 37 pages, I do not have the stomach for more than that. It was creepy, and it was just ugh. But ugh, in like really good way. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, I really hesitate to say I enjoyed it, but I'm really glad I read it. Then next up I read, it was In the Veins of the Drowning by Callie Cassidy. So I finished this on the 13th of June, so like a month and a half ago. And I'm struggling to recall too much about it. It kind of tells me everything. I think it was a very midway book. It was quite an easy, accessible read. It was a very popcorn read. Like, I read it in just like two or three sittings. It didn't take very long to read. And when I was reading it, and I wasn't like, I never felt tempted to put it down. But I also wouldn't say that it achieved anything new. It felt like, and I don't want to be harsh, but it very much felt like a run-of-the-mill romantasy that was sort of like rush published just to hop on the bandwagon, because that's what's really popular right now. So yeah. And yeah, I'm really struggling to recall anything about it or think of anything else to say about it. So yeah, that was In the Veins of the Drowning. Next up we had Nine of Swords Reversed. I used this because I needed a gender fluid character for one of my Herkiad prompts. And it's also, I want to say the author is Jewish, so it also filled that prompt for Herkiad. This is a short story which I think I wrote a review for this one, so what did I actually say in my review? Yeah, it was very sweet, cozy, wholesome, about two people who are dealing and processing with some past traumas. And ultimately it was about sort of like communication was the heart of this story. It was basically about these two people who they're an established couple, they've been in a long-term relationship with some subdom. What is that word? With the subdom dynamic, and both of them are almost holding back because they don't want to hurt or upset or make the other uncomfortable. And ultimately the point of this story was, the heart of this was them both just relearning to communicate. Just because a couple starts off being really good at communicating, it's not something that you get good at and then that's it, you're good at it. It's something that you do have to constantly work at. So I really appreciated the way the author handled that. It did feel like it was only 55 pages, and I would say that to an extent this book felt like diversity for diversity's sake. Representation almost for representation's sake. There was, so we have gender fluid, we have non-binary, we've got disability, physical and mental disabilities. Add to that a couple of paranormal elements. The author was trying to put too much in here and honestly needed another 50 pages to really do justice to everything that they were trying to put across. I think ultimately, for everything that they were putting in, they needed to give more space and give more exploration to it. Because some of the things did feel like I put you in there just to show this representation. And I love the fact that you can pick up a book and people are being very deliberately diverse with their characters, especially for identities that maybe don't see as much page time. I think that's great, but when it's done in such a way, unfortunately in this way, it's like, okay, you put it in there, but what did it actually achieve? What did it add to the character? It just, I don't know, it just felt a bit, and there was too much focus on the representation and not enough on the story at points. And yeah, it had so much potential that I think it was just let down a little bit. The next one was The Laboratory Assistant by Natalia Loya. This was a NetGalley arc that I got. I needed it for, I want to say, my June release. And this is essentially a what is this one about? We're following our main character. It's set at the time of sort of like the Russian Revolution and the Bolshoi, I think they're called, where we're following our main character. She is the eldest daughter in her family. Her family now consists of her mum, herself, and her two sisters. Their father has since passed away. They were nobility, but obviously the nobility have been completely overthrown, so they are now living everyday life among the rest of us, trying to find work, trying to keep themselves afloat. The mum is really ill. One of the young sisters is still school age, so they're doing everything they can to be able to afford a governess or a tutor to come in and still keep up the youngest's education, and the two older daughters are going out and working. Now, our main character, Maria, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. She was working in a factory, but her wages keep getting slashed and slashed and her hours extended, and it's not sustainable. So she ends up getting work essentially as a lab assistant for the doctor. Oh, what's he called? Dr. Rodden, who's a very eccentric young man and is doing... He's a doctor in the sense of like academical doctor. He's not like a surgeon. And he's doing research into consumption or tuberculosis. But there's something just a bit not quite right with him. He comes across as very, very harmless, but he's definitely got some eccentricities. Things do start taking a little bit of a turn for the weird, and a little bit of a romance blooms. And yeah, quite a bit of mystery happens because you're just like, what is going on here? And yeah, it was genuinely, I didn't know what to expect when I picked it up, because like I say, it was a NetGalley arc. It was one of the read now ones. And I had a great time with this. I thought it was really well written. The characters were so beautifully written. Each character was very unique. Anytime they were on page, you could immediately tell who was on page, who was talking, who they were talking about. Where the story went, in some ways I expected it, in some ways I really didn't. Because throughout, with Maria working for this doctor and things between them developing and then him leaving and coming and various things are happening, her sister has joined the rebellion. So we've kind of got all of that in the background, including all of the dangers and things that are going on with that. And it's just, yeah, it was great. So I think it should be released by now. So if you're interested, it is The Lab Assistant by Natalia Loya. Okay, the next one I read, this was Bait by Adriana Herrera. It is the second book in the After the End anthology. It followed first by Ellie Hazelwood. And other than saying I genuinely hated this book, I cannot think of anything positive to say about it. I'm just going to leave it there. I gave it 1 star, and I can't remember the last time I gave something 1 star. If it weren't for the fact that the audiobook was only 4.5 hours long, and it was counting towards 2 of my prompts for finishing Herkiad, I would have DNF'd this within about an hour of listening to it. I have no intention of picking up an Adriana Herrera again. I can understand why she would appeal to some readers. I am very much not the target audience. This book was basically erotica, and yeah, if you do want to know more of my thoughts about this, I did rant quite a little bit about it in my Herkiad 2 wrap-up, because it was the worst book that I personally felt. This was my least favourite book that I read throughout Herkiad, that I read and finished throughout Herkiad. Honestly, even amongst all the DNFs I have had in the last year, this is probably still the worst one. I didn't enjoy it in the slightest. So yeah, don't really want to give it more brain space, if I'm perfectly honest. When's that one? Oh my gosh. I was like, I thought we were almost there. I was like, no, we've still got 3 more books to read, to talk about. So the next one that I finished, this was one that was so anticipated when I first pre-ordered it. And then it came in, and then it sat on my shelf, and it finally came in. It got pushed back so often that my pre-order essentially got cancelled, and I had to go in and reorder it. And then it came in, and then it got such mixed reviews by the community that I was like, oh, I don't know. So I put it off, because this has sat on my shelf for over 1.5 years now. But that is Heavenly Tyrant by Zhuan Jie Zhao. This is the sequel to Iron Widow. So Iron Widow is basically The Handmaid's Tale meets Pacific Rim, with a little bit of Ender's Game in there. Women are called up to serve as concubines for the male pilots and to serve as the female half, and to join with the male pilots in the chrysalises. And the chrysalises are sent out to battle the invading alien bug things. The male pilots are revered almost as gods. They are worshipped. They get off with literally anything. And 99% of the time the female pilot dies. So women are very much seen as expendable in this. And in Iron Widow, our main character, Zetian, she is called up as an Iron Widow. She's called up as a pilot. I think she almost volunteers for it. And she gets paired with the same pilot that her sister did. And she doesn't care about anything else. She just wants revenge for her sister. And when they go out into the chrysalis, something happens and something doesn't quite go as planned. And in the end, Zetian comes out alive and on top. The pilot is dead. And there's this great scene where you see her crawling out and she's just standing like 1 foot on his chest. And it's great. The first book is basically the rebellion and overcoming and toppling the regime. And trying to make that difference and make world better. Iron Widow is what happened, not Iron Widow. Heavenly Tyrant is what happens next. Heavenly Tyrant says, great, you toppled the old system, you took the rebellion, you rose against all the odds, you beat everything. Awesome. Now the hard work actually begins. Because great, you just toppled the government. Now you have to rebuild everything. Almost from scratch, and you have to somehow come in and take over. Tonally, this is very different from Iron Widow, because where Iron Widow is all feminine rage and yeah, we're just gonna get over this, I'm gonna do it, and it's very high energy. Pacing wise, this is a lot slower. The tone is a lot more mature. Now, partly that is because we are going from high energy, that very impulsive decisions, to actually now we need to stop and deal with the consequences. And part of that is because when Iron Widow was published, they didn't quite know whether it was going to go in young adult or adult. I think the author wanted it to go in adult, but ultimately it was decided it was going to go into young adult, and thus some editing changes were made to make the writing style fit to a YA audience as opposed to an adult audience. Those changes were not made with Heavenly Tyrant. I really enjoyed this. I think it helps that I knew tonally this was going to be a very different book. I was conscious of the reviews, but because I went in there knowing that, I think I went in with the right expectations. I went in knowing that this was not going to be Iron Widow, that this was very much going to be something new, something more mature, something a bit darker, believe it or not. Yeah, I actually really appreciated that. There are, I would say, look up a couple of trigger warnings. Like I say, this does get a bit darker. Some choices are made, you're like, oof. Wow, that was a choice. Yeah, that was a choice. There is not a single character in here who is likable. It's certainly not of, like, I would say of our 3 main characters. Definitely not like the 2 main characters. They are not likable. We knew that for Zishian, we knew from Iron Widow that she wasn't a very likable character. It is more so within Heavenly Tyrant, and that is very much by design. That's something people do need to be conscious of going into, that you're not going into this rooting for any of the characters, because none of them are good, nice, likable people. They are all cold and cynical and calculating and quite selfish, and they are all out to protect themselves above all else. And if helping other people helps them achieve their goals, then that's great, but everything is just a means to an end. But it works so well that it still was quite a compulsive read, and I still had a really good time, and I really enjoyed this. I am very excited. This is, I thought that, what are we calling this duology? The Iron Widow duology? Iron Widow series? I can't remember what it's called. I'm just gonna call it the Iron Widow series. I thought it was a duology. So this is my warning to you all. It's not. This ends on a cliffhanger. This ends on a, well, what are we gonna do now? Wait for the 3rd one, but who knows if that's ever gonna happen, because there's currently no word of a 3rd one. I mentioned before that this one has been pushed back and back and back, and a huge part of that was because of disagreements and falling outs that Zhuan Zhizhao had with the publisher. A lot of it due to Zhuan Zhizhao's politics and views, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't. So yeah, it was an interesting one. Because of that, I'm not going to hold my breath with the hope of getting my hands on the continuation anytime soon. Which is really, really sad, because they are really good and really well written books. But that is the risk you take. If you start reading a series before it's fully published, this is the risk we take, isn't it? This is a reminder of why we don't do it that often. But yeah, the second to last book that I finished in June was The Eyes Have It by Randall Garrett. This was 49 pages. It felt a little bit longer. It was published back in 1964. I needed a book that had "it" in the title to complete my quote. No, I did not need it. I needed "have." It's surprisingly difficult to find books with the word "have" in the title. Or at least certainly, like, they don't exist on my physical TB. Excuse me. They don't really exist on my physical TBR. Yeah, this was... What was this book? This was like essentially a... This was essentially a medieval whodunit. But with a little bit of witchcraft and sorcery. It was a bit fun. It was fun. It was a bit of a romp. It was very much like, when I say it was a whodunit, it was very much a whodunit in the veins of like a Sherlock mystery, where it was like, okay, we've gone through basically like this lord dies in his bed, and our main character is called in to try and solve the mystery. So it's like very Sherlock / Poirot type. I think it's almost like part of a series, like very episodic stories where our main character is trying to figure out a different mystery every time, and there is a bit of magic involved. I quite enjoyed there was a bit of magic which involved almost like a soul memory, where in like within the it needs to occur within like the first couple of hours of someone passing away, but you can see, like, through their eyes, you can see glimpses of the last things they saw. So I thought that was kind of cool. And yeah, it was fine. It was a murder mystery. It was just, it's never going to be my favourite genre, but it was an interesting and a weird one, so it was fine. And then the last one I read, and we're going to finish this on a high because I had a really, really sweet time with this, and I'm very much coming to realise, to the shock and surprise of nobody, that cozy fantasy romance is absolutely becoming one of my favourite things and one of my favourite genres, because I finally got around to reading The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst, and it is absolutely... I called the first book I started talking about Utterly Charming. The first book I read, I finished, Utterly Charming, and I'm gonna end on an utterly charming book. So we are following Kayla. Kayla is a librarian in sort of like the capital city, but there's a rebellion is ongoing, the government being overthrown, and a lot of buildings are being burnt. So she is already in the process of like packing up a lot of the books to rescue them anyway, but when it turns out the fires are getting a lot closer, she bundles all the books out of the library into her little boat and brings them back to her hometown, which she and her parents left years ago. But it's a great place to hide out because it's out on one of the outer islands. No one would even think to look for them there. And yeah, it's basically about her just coming home and finding her home and finding where she belongs. All the characters within the village are just, it is just such a host of charming characters, and I suspect, because I know there's at least 2 more books in this series, so I suspect that the protagonists of those 2 books are going to be other characters from the town, like the little village, which I'm very excited for. I think it's going to be really, really good. And yeah, it's also set in a world where, unless basically only the sorcerers are allowed to own the magic books and use and cast spells, and it's only the sorcerers who've been to like the university by the king's or the emperor's decree or whoever. But they've not been doing the rounds as often, so things like there's some really bad magic storms and things happening, so the outer islands are very much neglected. So Kayla starts using some of the spells to help out the villagers. And then also opens up a little jam shop as sort of like her cover, and it's great. I particularly adored Kaz, who is a sentient spider plant, and has such a little attitude, and he's absolutely wonderful. And yeah, I don't want to say too much more about it other than it really was such a charm, warm, cozy read, and I am so excited to continue on with the series. But finally, I think we're at like 45-50 minutes. This video's in a couple parts due to reasons. So I don't know how long I've been filming in total, but I don't think I've rambled on as long as I could have, as long as I anticipated. So I'm going to take that as a positive. I'm going to take that as a win. But yeah, let me know. Have you read any of these? How did you get on with them? And what have you been reading lately? And yeah, if you like this, feel free to hit that like button, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!